Heidi, why can't we go into the woods again? A small 7-year-old boy asks, voice curious, as he gets into bed. He pulls his covers over him as he lays down. The boy's mother gives him a small smile and helps him settle in. The moonlight casts a soft glow through the window. The woods are very dangerous, she answers him, sitting on the bed, and holds a great evil within that preys on people. The boy looks at his mother with curious yet confused eyes. The Naki live there, she supplies at his look. The Nadi? He asks curiously, causing his mother to let out a small chuckle. Naki, she sounds out. They are water spirits that live within a lake at the center of the woods. They look friendly and beautiful, but they are not. They are shapeshifters that lure you to them. When you are within their grasp, they drag you down with them into the water where you can never leave. The boy gasps in shock at his mother's words. Never? He asks. Never. Once they have you, they eat you, she finishes. The boy's bright emerald green eyes are wide with fear. Promise me, Alexei, that you will never go into the woods. The woman fiercely asks her son, her own emerald eyes pleading. The boy looks at his mother. I promise, he tells her. The mother gives her son a kiss on his forehead and bids him good night. This legend of the Naki is one the mothers of Eldmere, Finland, have always told their children. Stay out of the woods, lest the Naki will take you away forever. As children, we held the legend with childlike contempt. They scared us enough to where we listened. But we were still children. We would tease each other at school the next day. One of us would pretend to be the Naki and chase the rest of us around at recess. As we grew older, we realized the legend was just a story, a fairy tale. Mothers told their children to make them behave and stay out of the woods. And as time went on, we stopped believing. Alexei, Gareth, and Maki are here. I hear my mother shout from the front door. I quickly stuff the rest of my korvapusti into my mouth. Licking cinnamon off of my fingers, I quickly grab my bag and head to the front door. I can see my friends waiting at the bottom of the steps. I'll see you later, Heidi, I say, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. Before I can step out of the door, she grabs me by the arm. Alexei. Yes, I sigh, already knowing what's about to happen. Gareth and Maki look up at us, also knowing, before heading to the end of the walkway. I turn my attention back to my mother. Have fun, she starts. Her grip on my arm gets tighter. And please do not go into the woods, she pleads. I know, I tell her. My voice comes out a bit harsh. She flinches slightly, causing me to sigh. Olin pahoilani, Heidi, I say as I embrace her. She smiles softly and gives me a gentle pat on the cheek. I know you get tired of me telling you this, Poikani, but I just want you to be safe. I know, Heidi, I promise, I tell her. Her bright eyes search mine for a second before nodding her head. I'll see you tomorrow, she tells me. Giving her another kiss on the cheek, I leave the house and walk towards my friends. Are you ready? Gareth asks, a wide smile on his face. His dark russet brown eyes sparkle and his broad shoulders hum in excitement. I look at Maki with a raised eyebrow, to which he shrugs his shoulders. You're pretty excited, huh? I ask as we walk down the road. The streets are slowly dying down as people pack up their vendors for the day and start making their way home. The sun's descent paints the sky with pink, orange, yellow, and purple. Of course, I'm excited. This meteor shower is the most exciting thing to happen in this town since Mrs. Lottie got caught sleeping with mailman by her husband, he states, causing Maki snicker beside me. You can't tell me you're not excited about seeing an actual meteor shower, Gareth states, looking at me. I am, I tell him. Eldmere is almost completely surrounded by woods and is a small town compared to others in Finland. With less than 300 people here and 3 stoplights, there isn't much to do here. He then looks at Maki. With a roll of his cornflower blue eyes, he gives us Gareth a nod. It is exciting, and it's nice to get out of the house. He tells him, "Is your mom still fighting with your sister?" I ask him, "When are they not fighting?" He sighs. "It's gotten even worse over the past couple of months with Ein's new boyfriend, who I'm pretty sure she's dating just to irritate Mom. Ein is a little over a year younger than Maki and has always been difficult. She seems to crave getting into trouble. The arguing has gotten bad enough to where Dad has been staying in the den when he's not at work, though now it's more of Mom shouting and Ein ignoring her." He finishes with another sigh. "Well, this will be a good distraction," Gareth tells him with a pat on the back. It doesn't take us long to get to the creek. A bright, burning fire flickers, lighting up the area. Music fills the air and drunken teenagers stumble around. The sound of the rushing water can barely be heard of the excited shouts. A quick glance at my watch shows we still have about half an hour before the shower is supposed to start. We head over to the fire and relax, something we haven't really been able to do lately. I'm talking to a classmate when bright lights flicker across my sight, causing me to look up. The sound of excited cheers and shouts fill the air as the meteor shower begins. It is quite a beautiful sight. Streaks of light shoot across a star-filled sky. "Wow, this is amazing," Maki states in wonder, the first genuine smile I've seen in weeks settling on his face. Before I can agree with him, I feel Gareth pull on my sleeve. "Isn't that Ein with Kali?" he asks, pointing off to the side. Following his finger towards the creek, I spot the familiar long, blonde hair of Ein. She's holding Kali's, a teen of questionable motives, hand as they step into the creek. "Are they going into the woods?" Ask. "Ein!" Maki shouts, but she doesn't hear him. With a scowl on his face, he runs towards them. Gareth and I look at each other before chasing after him. By the time we reach the edge of the woods, the two teens have already disappeared inside. Maki shouts her name again, but there is no response. He takes a step forward, causing Gareth to grasp his arm. "You're not seriously thinking about going in the woods?" he asks, voice incredulous. Out of all of us, Gareth's mother is the most superstitious, driving into his head about the evil that lives within. "I can't just leave her in there, especially not with him," Maki states. His voice is hard, but a tiny tremble in his voice reveals his fear. "He's right, Gareth." I start walking up beside Maki. Besides, the Naki is superstition, just something our mothers made up. "We'll be fine." He still looks hesitant, but he steps forward with a nod. Together, the three of us enter the woods for the first time. The trees seem even more daunting up close. They stand tall, with moonlight filtering through their thick foliage. Our phones offer more light. As we walk through, a heavy sense of foreboding fills me. I feel like we've made a mistake entering the woods, but it's too late to turn back. Maki continues to yell for Ein, his voice echoing. The only other sound are the fallen leaves crunching under our feet. Am I the only one silently freaking out? Gareth whispers. I go to respond when I hear something. I quickly shush both of them and put a finger to my lip. A couple of seconds pass when I hear the sound again. A sound almost like screaming. My eyes lock with Maki's for a split second before he takes off. With a curse, we quickly follow him. The screams are getting closer and louder. Ein! Maki shouts loudly. Maki! She shouts in return, her voice right next to us. Suddenly Gareth goes down as something collides with him. He groans as he lands on the ground with a thud. I quickly shine my light, revealing Gareth's pain-filled face and Ein's frightened one. Ein! Maki shouts, going towards her. He gathers her in his arms as sobs rock her frame. Leaves and twigs stick out of her wet hair. Mud and blood cake her pale face. There is a bleeding gash on her forehead, and small cuts litter her skin. Her clothes are torn, bloodied, and drenched in water. Ein, are you okay? Did Kali do this to you? Maki asks frantically. She shakes her head, her body still trembling. And no, Kali didn't do this. She stutters out. I take off my jacket and wrap it around her shoulders. We have to get out of here. She tries to stand up, but her shaking legs force her back down again. Take it easy, Maki says. She grabs his arms in a fierce grip. We have to leave right now. She growls out, her voice has stopped shaking. It's coming. Ein, what are you talking about? What happened to you? They're real. The Naki, they're real. She tells us the last part a whisper. They can't be. It's a store dash. Maki replies. It killed Kali. She interrupts, casting us into silence. Dragged him into the lake, kicking and screaming, and tore him apart. She pulls down the collar of her shirt, revealing a deep bite mark that definitely does not look human. It almost got me, but I got away somehow. I look at Ein, not quite believing my ears. The story my mother always told me was real. Suddenly, an inhuman screech fills the air, causing us all to freeze. More screeches fill the air and are steadily growing in volume. It's coming. Ein whispers, her pale blue eyes widening in fear. I quickly help her stand, the screeches getting closer. Run! I shout. I grab Ein's hand and head in the opposite direction that she came from, Maki and Gareth right behind us. Bushes and low branches cut into my skin, but I pay them no mind, focused only on getting out of the woods. This can't be happening. This cannot be happening. I hear Gareth state in a breathless voice. We just have to make it out of the woods. I tell him when suddenly the screeching is right beside us. Before I can say anything, a black mass rushes at me, knocking me down. I feel pain as my body hits the ground. I'm disoriented at first, but my vision clears, revealing sharp teeth coming towards my face. I quickly kick my feet out, sending it away from me. Grabbing the closest thing to me, a thick stick, I scramble to my feet. The Naki has taken the shape of a beautiful, naked woman. Its hair is long, white, and drags upon the ground. Blood stains its pale skin, and its eyes are black as night. It flicks its attention between the four of us, as if deciding who to go after first. The dark orbs settle on Ein, and a cruel smile stretches across its face. With fingers clawed, it races towards her. I use the stick and smack the Naki across the face. Before it can get its bearing, I hit it again, forcing it back. I go to hit it once more, when it grabs the end of the stick and rips it out of my hand. It then wraps its hand around my throat, lifting me into the air. I try to pry its hand off, but it is too strong. I hear Maki shout as he runs towards us with a stick of his own. The Naki easily knocks him away and brings its other towards my left arm. Takes my arm and brings it towards its mouth. I try to resist. Suddenly there is pain shooting up my arm as the creature takes a bite. My scream fills my ears and the air. Taking its mouth away, the Naki looks at me with a blood-stained grin. Then it goes for my shoulder. Its sharp teeth tears into my skin. The pain is absolutely excruciating, and I can feel it through my entire body. My body is weakening and black spots fill my vision as it continues to feed from my flesh. The shouts of my friends echo in the background, but I know it's useless. I am going to die tonight. All I can think about is my mother and the fact that she will be heartbroken. I'm sorry I didn't keep my promise, Heidi. I think as I start to fade out, suddenly, the teeth and pressure around my throat are lifted. As I fall to the ground, I gasp and cough as air rushing back into my lungs. A screech fills the air once again, but this one is filled with pain. Still weak, I can only lift my head a bit to see. Another screech reaches my ears, even louder and longer than the last. The Naki is on the ground with several arrows sticking out of it. Still screeching, it tries to crawl away, but another arrow finds it, this time piercing what I believe to be its heart, causing it to go quiet. A sense of peace fills me at the creature's silence. I may be dying, but at the very least, my friends will be okay. As I begin to black out, Familiar emerald green eyes lock onto my own. The smell of lilac fills my nose and soft hands caress my face. "Idy," I whisper. I see a small smile settle on her face. "Olin Pahoilani," she states softly, tears running down her face. "I told you to stay out of the woods." "I know." "I'm sorry," I tell her. "Rest," she says. I close my eyes and surrender to the darkness. My sweet baby, all fresh and pure. I see nothing sweeter than my babe before. I will hold you proudly till you can walk strong. Then my little babe will be gone, a strong man. And then this sweet mother will rejoice for so long. Aged arms caressed a soft child as the song was hummed with a raspy voice. The child slumbered as his mother slowly put him down into the crib. Sunlight streamed into the room, flooding the wooden rocking chairs, the body-size mirror, and the sleeping babe in a golden warmth. The woman, who had graying hair and soft facial features, walked slowly around the room, her white sundress flowing behind her. She had her right arm over her stomach and her left elbow on top of that. Her hand reached up towards her mouth. 3 fingers were put on her lips and the pinky and thumb crossed over the palm and touched softly. As she walked around, she touched each and every single toy that were on the small dressers. Smiling, she turned back to the crib and walked over gently. The babe was silent, still sleeping. Putting her 3 fingers on the baby's forehead, she rubbed them up to the top of his head. She was silent as she stared at this baby. This was her baby, her last one. Little Richard. She loved that name. That was the name of her firstborn, the one that had died when he was 2 months old. Since then, she had had 3 other children. Straightening, she turned and went out of the room. She grabbed a small book from the bookshelf in the hallway and headed towards the kitchen. Putting the book on the oak table, she sat down, the floorboards of the old home creaking. The room was dusty, and most of the kitchen was untouched, almost stuck in a time long ago. As she sat, her eyes washed over the room. Something in her stirred. Something didn't feel right. It was untouched. She remembered dusting it yesterday. She had dusted it yesterday, and swept the floor and scrubbed the cabinets. Shrugging it off, she opened the book, which was a photo album. Her mind was whisked away into the yellowing pictures before her. Smiling faces, birthday parties, and old pictures of the family covered the sticky pages that cracked and popped gently when they were turned. She looked at each one. One was of a young boy with blonde hair and big eyes. He had only a diaper on. She giggled, for this was her little Richard. The second child was a little young girl. She wore a little white dress and held a small teddy bear. Little Anna. The woman frowned. Where was little Anna now? She didn't remember seeing her around. She turned to a different page, and another little girl smiled up at her. Little Emma. Again another frown, and again another child. This one was little Donald. As she turned the page again, her heart rate had started to race. Where were these kids? She stopped on a picture. A cold hand clenched her heart and let out a loud gasp. She pushed the book off the table and stood, her breathing becoming shallow. The photo album flopped to the ground with a sharp thud, the terrible picture lying face down in the dust that covered the floors. 2 police officers stood in this picture with body bags, and a woman who resembled too much of her was handcuffed. Bloody and angry, running towards the baby's room, she rushed in and darted for the crib. Grabbing the railing, she looked down only to let out a raspy scream. Instead of a baby, was a thing of rotting flesh and foul-smelling decay. The mother felt her hands and body go numb. Shakily, she looked down at her hands. Dried blood covered every inch of them. Looking down, she eyed her clothing, which were covered with the crimson sin. She noticed more coming from the hallway. Frantically, she followed the bloody trail back into the kitchen. Her photo album still laid face down, but everything had changed. Dishes were all over the floor, the table was overturned. Fridge door was open, and 3 little children lay dead on the ground, bathing in crimson puddles. A knife lay within them. The mother tried to scream, but only an agonizing squeak came out. Shaking her head and waving her hands, she started to back up only to fumble and trip over something solid and stiff. Looking at it, fear filled her eyes. There she saw her own body lying, a gun in one hand and a note in the other. Shakily, she picked up the note and read it. The words of her sweet lullaby rang out like white noise. Throwing it down in fear, she jumped to her feet and rushed back to the baby's room. Throwing herself into the corner, she covered her face and sobbed. Rocking back and forth, she remembered. In her pain and agony, she remembered everything. She walked into the living room where her 3 children lied. They were watching Saturday morning cartoons. All morning she had been drinking, and her own self-control was lower than low today. She hadn't taken her medication yet. They angered her. She hadn't even showered. Water was always too hot. She hadn't done anything. Walking into the kitchen, she grabbed a plate and out of nowhere threw it on the ground. Looking around, her vision started to fade in and out. A shrill voice of a child cried out from the back of the house. This crying made her head hurt, and she wanted it to stop. She went down the hallway and into the baby's room. The baby screamed some more and squirmed around in the crib. That angered her even more. Looking around, she tried to find a way to make the baby stop, but finding nothing, she just stared at it. Screamed again, and then she lunged. She put her large hands around the child's neck and squeezed, yelling and begging for it to stop. After the child abruptly stopped, the mother backed away. The baby's mouth was covered in blood, and so were her hands. But that didn't stop her outrage. She ran down the hallway and into the kitchen, where she hastily had taken a knife from the drawer, its silver glinting in the dim light that shone through the window. Her other 3 children fumbled to their feet, letting out gasps of terror as their mother ran into the living room, her eyes wide and her knuckles white as she clenched the knife. She ran towards them, making them run to the kitchen in an attempt to get away from her. Unfortunately, she was able to grab Donald. He screamed and cried, but his mother took no heed to him and stabbed him in the chest 3 times. Blood squirted and landed on the wooden floor, turning the coppery brown to a velvety red. Her other children screamed and hid in a corner. Their mother stared at them, eyeing up each child. The T.V was just a constant drone in the back of her mind as she pointed to Anna, beckoning for her to come. Anna shook her head and shrunk down further into the corner, praying that she disappear from this nightmare. Emma stared at her little brother's dead body. The mother got angry again and tried to demand her forward, her voice high and startling. This time Anna screamed, "No!" The mother swore and lunged forward, throwing Emma out of the way and grabbing Anna, stabbing her 3 times. More blood squirted, landing all over the walls and onto Emma. Emma fell to the ground sobbing and crying, "Mommy, no! Please, no!" But of course the mother grabbed Emma and stabbed her 3 times. The screaming hurt her head. After the blood had sprouted from her daughter's stomach, the mother raced around the kitchen, destroying everything in her rage. She flipped over the table and started to throw the dishes out of the cupboards. She opened the fridge and threw all the food around. After she had stopped, the mother looked around. She dropped the knife and sobbed herself. With loud gasps and moans of distress and anguish, she walked to her room, where a gun was hidden in the top drawer of her dresser. Sitting on the bed, she cried and screamed, punching the mattress. After an hour or so of crying, she had grabbed the gun and had walked to the kitchen, a note in her hand. Carefully, she dragged her precious babies out of the living room and placed them in the kitchen. They laid before the overturned table. One last meal with her babies, she decided. Standing over them, she carefully placed 1 bullet into the barrel of the gun. Looking into the black hole of her salvation, she began to sing, her finger on the trigger. "My sweet baby, all fresh and pure. I see nothing sweeter than my babe before. I will hold you proudly till you can walk strong. Then my little babe will be gone, a strong man, and then this sweet mother will rejoice for so long. The boy should have known something was wrong the moment he glanced back over his shoulder, but he was too tired and wary and afraid to register the truth. He followed the sound of the keening pipe. Its unfamiliar melody, absurdly cheerful, jarred him from the carnage. It filtered through the pores of his skin and infused him with the strength and warmth he needed to run through the icy clutches of winter. The forest muffled the sounds within and beyond it as if the trees themselves swallowed noise, all but the tune of the unseen piper. Time stood still, cradled between the labyrinth of jutting roots and a cotton cloud sky that was falling apart. Tufts of snow floated down through naked branches as if massive pillowcases had exploded during a massive pillow fight between massive gods who did not care that far below them the falling snow sizzled against flames that devoured a village. Run, his mother had rasped, pushing him through the back door of their home, the door that led to the chickens and pigs, and he'd run until he'd fallen, slipping in the snow and in the refuse of the squealing animals, his vision fractured by his tears. He turned back then, ashamed to have run, ashamed to have left her, even though she no longer quite looked like his mother. Once she'd been beautiful, the belle of the village, people said. Then the red blotches appeared, lesions that began on her arms and spread across her chest and throat, an army of ants beneath her skin that disfigured her face and body. She did not cry out when she cut a finger or burnt her hands in the kitchen. Her once lush hair fell from her scalp like shorn wheat, littering the floor in clumps. Yet her eyes were always his mother's eyes, calm and blue and cool like a damp cloth against a fevered brow, radiating such love that he felt she embraced him even when she avoided touching him. She was all he had left, the only person who cared enough to weep and caress his face when lesions spread across his own back and grew thick like the pedicles of a second spine. When he crept back into the house, keeping to the shadows, the boy found nothing left of his mother but a dark stain on the floorboards that streaked from the kitchen to the bedroom. A man appeared in that doorway, his body and face sheathed in fabrics and spells that would not let the infection touch him, gripping a sword that wept red tears from its edge. The boy hid until the man turned away and then sprinted back out into the night. He ran through the streets, dodging the hooves of horses and the torched firewood that the yelling soldiers threw his way. He fell only once when something sharp hit his head. It seemed he opened his eyes mere seconds later. Snow filled his nostrils until he raised his head. Once he did, the scent of smoke engulfed him. The crackle of the fires was nearly drowned by screams that would not end. He scrambled to his feet, the snow beneath him stained crimson as if with wine, and stumbled away from the slaughter and toward the trees. And so now he ran, torn by despair and fear, amazed that his matchstick legs could outrun the sinewy limbs of the armored horses and the fiery wrath of their riders' flamethrowers. He wished he could have found, could have lifted, the axe that had been his father's, with its handle longer than his arm, and swung it into the chest of anyone who dared approach his mother. He wished he had not left her when she pushed him out of their home. He wished he had not seen her blood upon the floor. He wished someone would have come to their village to cure instead of to eradicate. The forest echoed with the shrieks of women who fought and pled and bled as gloved soldiers dragged them through the streets and pushed them into burning homes, of men as their hands, along with the pitchforks or knives they held in them, were severed by swords whetted on the bones of prior villagers, of children who collapsed when those who chased them flung torches at their backs. And above all this, the haunting croon of a pipe, promising all that a hurt little boy could desire, and so to that piping this little boy fled. The more he ran, the stronger he felt. When he could no longer hear the screams and the flames, the boy realized what the song said, even though there were no words. It spoke of melted snows and rays of sun that embraced all whom they touched like warm knit sweaters. It spoke of a father who opened his eyes as color filled his cheeks and laughter spilled from his mouth. It spoke of a mother whose skin was smooth and soft and smelled of vanilla and kneaded bread. It spoke of brothers and sisters who danced and teased and loved and lived, who picked him up when he scarred his knees and told him stories when he could not sleep. It spoke of a world where bad things couldn't come, where he could be free to grow old and weathered and well-loved like the most kindly of grandfathers. The boy ran faster, fast enough that it felt like he flew, anxious to get to the world the song spoke of. He even began to catch glimpses of the piper through the trees. Though he scampered and danced as he played his pipe, he appeared sometimes before, sometimes behind, and sometimes beside the boy. He wore a black hooded cloak that hid his face. Beneath it his clothes were pied, a patchwork of vibrant color impossible to miss whenever the wind whipped back the cloak. His pipe and fingers were white of bone, and just like the boy, he left no footprints in the snow. Jagged white flakes tumble to the earth, collect on the wood piled beneath the cabin's frosted window. Fuel for the only remaining source of heat since the power went out. Carmen extricates her grip from the back of the puke green couch and faces the spacious living room. A circular rug spans between her, a matching recliner, a stone hearth, and oak shelves displaying antique cookbooks and a tiny wooden train. Viola returns from one of two other rooms, a sweet fragrance mingling with that of charred timber. Her arms are loaded with 2 mugs, a hot pad, and a reusable grocery bag. Light blares from the phone tucked under her chin, its only useful function this far from civilization. I found cocoa. It's peppermint, your favorite. No, it's yours. Treats should never taste like toothpaste. Carmen swallows the retort, dropping to the floor. Great. Viola fishes the cast iron kettle from the coals, her ruby pendant taunting the flames. As she fills the cups, steam flows over the lip, billows up, catching her hand. She seethes a breath between her teeth. Carmen takes her cup, clicking her new manicure against the flowery porcelain. What kind of 90-year-old woman lives this far out? Has backup cocoa but not a generator? I think it's sweet. Viola shrugs. Kinda reminds me of my gran, but less racist. Carmen never met the woman who agreed to pay a complete stranger to house sit. But when she told Viola it was a bad idea to go alone, even to help a sweet old lady, Viola suggested she come along. Carmen should have refused. Cheer up, she'll be back to take us down the mountain in the morning, and... Viola rummages in the sack, then with a flourish present 2 bags of marshmallows. Your choice of small colored or large? Carmen points to the lump of pastels. Great choice. Then we can do s'mores too. Carmen's stomach gurgles and she takes a pensive sip of cocoa. Minty lava scalds the tip of her tongue. Is there anything more substantial? Viola peeks the bag open. There's chocolate pretzels. Carmen runs a hand over her face. Did the old woman possess any teeth? With a weighted sigh, she accepts them. For a time, the only sounds are those of sweets being consumed and wind battering the tiny cabin. Then a rumble sounds out front, accompanied by a piercing whine, a bit like an angry engine. Carmen scrambles for the sofa. She stares into the uncanny brightness of a snowy night, breath clouding the glass. But there's nothing in the driveway. The sound cuts off. In the space of a blink, the shadow from the base of one tree leaps out across the expanse of white and into the next. A breath snags in Carmen's throat, her stomach twisting into painful knots. Did you see that? Carmen doesn't take her gaze from the tree's base. That shadow, it moved. Maybe it was a raccoon jumping between branches. Viola says, a tremor to her voice. It's no doubt cold enough to drive any sane creature to its burrow, even if raccoons did jump like that, but Carmen nods. Viola turns back to the fire, using her mug-free hand to coax another log atop the flames. Ah, crap. Carmen's gaze snaps to her friend. What? We're down to 2 logs. Viola shifts the contents of the tinderbox and her brow slumps. Make that one and a handful of sticks. A chill crawls down Carmen's spine. She could have sworn the box was full a minute ago. We could just go to bed? Come on, it's only... There's a sharp click and light blares from Viola's phone. Like 7 and we don't need power to have fun. Carmen's face scrunches. Doing what? Freezing? Viola casts her eyes skyward. There's more would right outside the door. Carmen's chest constricts. She glances back out the window. Viola's lips twist. Want to? A sharp scraping rents the air, burrows into Carmen's skull. She smashes her palms against her ears, though the sound is gone. Time stretches out into an amorphous thing that could be a moment or an eternity. At some point, Carmen's lungs begin to function again. Viola drags on her coat, effo fur tufted around its hood and sleeves. You aren't seriously going out there. We need more firewood, and I'd like to know what that was. But we'll never find out cowering in here. Viola says, a slight tremor behind her harsh words. If a tree fell on the roof, we may need to do something to keep snow from getting in. That didn't sound like a tree falling, but having never heard one, Carmen's argument flounders and dies on her tongue. Viola flicks her phone light on. Be back in a minute. There's a rush of cold, appending every follicle on Carmen's being, and the door snaps shut behind Viola. Snow crunches, wind howling between the trees, in the hollows of the house. Then nothing, not so much as the whisper of a falling leaf. A reek, like decay steeped in gingerbread, seeps through the cabin's cracks. Dark rain blotches the snow, forming great crimson patches. Not rain, blood. Sound returns. With a wet plink, a mangled hand lands atop the woodpile. Carmen clutches her mouth, backing from the window. Viola! The word come out a strangled question. The door rattles. Carmen glances around, pulse thundering in her ears. Her gaze falls on the poker and she snatches it up. The knob turns. She tightens her grip. Smoky claws wrap the door frame. They grow denser, lightening into wrinkled human fingers. The door swings wide and in walks a stooped woman with gray wisps of hair. Carmen's shoulders slump, blood returning to her fingers. The old woman tilts her head at Carmen and grins, revealing jagged teeth dripping scarlet. And resting on her age-spotted chest is Viola's ruby pendant. Carmen sucks in a breath. Smoke coils from the old lady, her body becoming less solid. The poker rattles in Carmen's grasps. Sound blinks out and darkness envelopes her. The rain pounded the small stone home outside of the city of Corinth. The storm raged and the winds howled, and yet Lamia couldn't bring herself to acknowledge the storm's presence. All she could feel was the warm radiance of the god laying in bed next to her. His powerful arms wrapped around her body, making her feel safe and secure in the home. You more than any other mortal have captured my heart, Zeus said sleepily, a smile on his face as he gently stroked the hair out of Lamia's face. My heart is yours, now and forever, my lord, Lamia replied, reaching up and kissing his face gently. Lamia was the most beautiful woman of the village, her golden hair and sun-kissed skin making her desired by all. She was also known to be favored by the gods, most notably Zeus, who arrived at her home in the midst of a storm similar to the one playing out now, in the guise of a giant eagle. For you and only you, my love, I am not your lord. I am your love, as you are mine, Zeus replied, his muscular frame flexing under her soft touch as he moved his mane of curly black hair from his eyes. He found her lips with his own and began to kiss her softly at first, gradually becoming hungrier as they felt the throes of passion overtake them once more. So this is where you have been sneaking off to, my darling husband, a voice beckoned. The two lovers jumped at the sound of the voice, and Zeus strode forward in the room, anger blooming in his eyes. Who dares disrupt us? He demanded before recognition took hold in his eyes. Do you not recognize your wife? "O mighty Zeus?" Hera asked, stepping out of the shadows as her own golden glow began to radiate the room. Long flowing red and gold hair hung down her back, as the white sash she wore revealed her toned and athletic body, one bestowed upon to all of the gods. "Hera, what is the meaning of this?" Zeus asked. "You have the audacity to feign anger at me, husband? You who have left the world with more bastard children than can fill a temple in my honor? How ridiculous! And to debase your godhood by laying with this mere mortal, why, that is beyond dishonor. You should feel shame. Shame for what? For loving and being loved? You forget your place, Hera. I am the king of the gods, and you will show me the respect I deserve. Save the melodrama for when we return to Olympus. You and I know that you and I have equal power. In fact, let me demonstrate," Hera replied, pushing past her husband and towards the bed, where Lumia still held her white sash to her naked form. "My goddess, forgive me. I did not," Lamia began to say, her words falling short of spilling out of her mouth as she stared upon the beautiful goddess standing before her. "I'm sure you felt obliged to heed your feelings, especially in the presence of my divine husband here. Yet an example must be made, and you sadly must pay the price for my husband's mistake. Pity you, mortal. Your mortal life is now at an end, and only hell awaits you," Hera replied, with the simple touch of her hand to Lamia's forehead. The young woman's life changed forever. Lamia howled in agony as pain took hold of her. She could feel her skin peeling and cracking in places, while her hair fell out and her bones cracked. Her teeth sharpened and her ears grew pointed, and Lumia felt her humanity shed off of her as easy as a wolf's skin. "Zeus, my love, help me," Lamia cried, her voice growing heavy and rough as her transformation continued. Zeus watched in horror as the woman he loved twisted and turned into a hideous beast, and his heart broke at the sight. Chapter 1. Quinn Ford woke to the bright light of a California morning streaming in through the blinds of the beach house. The soothing sound of the waves crashing on the shore nearby was relaxing, and Quinn found himself fighting to stay awake. As he turned away from the bright morning light, he came face to face with Iris Walsh, his amazing girlfriend, and the world brightened once more. The weekend trip had come together perfectly. Quinn had surprised Iris with the weekend plans, and thankfully she had jumped at the opportunity. He needed a break from his latest novel, Baseline, and a weekend not answering another panicked call from his agent Helen was a welcome addition. Now in his 30s, Quinn found himself drawn more to peaceful and romantic weekends rather than the party life most 20-somethings craved for all week long. He'd been lucky to meet Iris in the first place. Iris Walsh was a 30-year-old photographer and makeup artist living in Los Angeles. He'd been working on his book in a bookshop/cafe and had noticed her sitting at the table next to him. Her face had been scrunched up as she studied something on her laptop, and he noticed she was drinking the same thing as him. He'd always been shy, and so he had hesitated talking to her at first, not knowing what to say. However, as he worked on his book, he found himself surprised when she sat down on the couch next to him, setting her laptop down. He looked up to see her looking at him, her emerald green eyes drawing him in immediately. "Sorry, the couch looked much more comfortable than the damn chair over there," she said, her Irish accent punching through and enticing him like music in the air. That's all right. Always plenty of room for a fellow vanilla late drinker," he joked, hoping his face was as blushed as he felt in that moment. He always felt awkward sitting next to a beautiful woman. As a heavy-set man, he always worried it would be the only thing a woman would be able to fixate on when talking to him. Yet Iris was different, never once breaking eye contact with him. These vanilla lates are delicious. I never had them back home, but damn are they good. Is that an Irish accent I'm detecting? Where in Ireland are you from?" "Sandymount, a small village outside Dublin on the coast. Just moved here a couple years ago. Name's Iris," Iris Walsh. The young woman introduced herself as Quinn Ford, he replied, and the rest was history as the saying goes. Now looking into Quinn's beautiful face and trailing his hand down her body, he could honestly say he'd never felt happier. Today was the day, he told himself. Today he would ask her to move in with him in his loft in LA. It had been a few months since they'd met, and she brought the best out of him, and he hoped she felt the same way, at least enough to say yes to his idea. "Good morning, darling," Iris said, smiling without opening her eyes. "How do you always know when I'm awake?" Quinn asked, smiling. "It's one of my superpowers, love," she replied, opening her eyes and smiling. "You are my superwoman. Did you get some good sleep?" "I always do when I'm next to you. What did you want to do today? Do you have to work?" "Nope, today I'm all yours. I was thinking we could have a late breakfast/early lunch, lay on the beach, and then take a moonlit stroll along the beach before dinner. I thought we'd check out the caves near the Pinnacles National Park. What do you say?" "I say that sounds a plan. Want to take a shower first?" "You read my mind," he replied, following her out of bed as the sheets fell from their bodies and they ran into the bathroom, quickly shutting the door behind them. Chapter 2. It had been a whirlwind day for the young couple in love. A hearty breakfast buffet followed by a long lounge on the beach in their bathing suits was the perfect recipe for a weekend getaway. Quinn could feel the anticipation building up inside him, wanting the night to come so he could finally ask her to move in with him. The nerves were intense, and he hoped that his instincts were right on this one. Yet as they lay together, Iris laying her head on his chest, Quinn couldn't help but feel like something was bothering her. She felt distant at times, almost like her mind was 1,000 miles away. Yet he didn't let that deter him. Instead, he told himself he was just psyching himself out of doing what he had set out to do, and so he moved forward with the day. As night descended, the young couple walked hand in hand along the trail of the Pinnacles National Park. The waves nearby crashed against the rocks as they walked, and Quinn breathed in the ocean air around them. "Today has been the perfect day," Iris said, her smile stretching into a grin as she looked up into his eyes. "It really has been," he replied, leaning down and kissing her on the lips softly. Before either one of them could say another word, the night air was pierced by the sound of a low growl. The couple tensed, their hearts stopping in their chests as they turned and saw a large pair of red eyes staring at them from the darkness of the trail they just walked. "Iris, we have to move," Quinn said. "Whatever that thing is, it's blocking our path back to the car," Iris replied. "There's a cave nearby. If we can find some high ground in there, maybe whatever it is will move on. I don't have anything to fight it off with, so we gotta take a chance here," Quinn replied. "I feel like we're being cornered," Iris said. "So do I, babe, but I don't think we have a choice. That thing is inching closer to us," Quinn began to say. Before either one could make a move, the creature stepped into the moonlight, and they gasped in horror as a massive wolf trailed down towards them. Tufts of black fur and pearly white teeth glistened in the moonlight, and its eyes seemed to blaze with fire as it walked closer and closer to them. Quinn and Iris began to make a move to run, but as they turned, they both found themselves caught on a large root, and the tumble sent them falling into the mouth of the cave below. Quinn opened his eyes as pain shot through the back of his head, stars exploding behind his eyelids as he returned to consciousness. The world around him was blurry, but he could see the outline of a large fire burning in front of him. As he swatted away the cobwebs from his memory, his vision cleared and he saw he was laying inside of a large cave. He could still hear the crashing of the waves from the mouth of the cave, and the memory of being chased by the wolf came flooding back. "Iris!" Quinn shouted, but before he could sit up, pain shot through him once more, and a cold marble finger laid against his lips. "Shoo, hush now, babe. It's all right now," a soothing voice called out, and he watched as Iris crawled next to him. She was a vision of beauty, as always. Her flowing white satin dress and porcelain skin seemed to shine in the light of the fire, and her piercing eyes held his gaze as she slowly climbed and straddled him, her soft hands slowly wiping the hair from his face. "Iris? Are you all right?" Quinn asked, his voice sounding as if it were coming from a great distance away. "We're both okay, my love. Just be here with me now," Iris said simply, her lips bearing down on his own in a powerful and ravenous motion. He'd never felt such intensity from her, and he felt weak in her presence. As she looked into his eyes, however, he saw her eyes change from green to red, and the world came crashing down around him. "You're not Iris?" Quinn said in shock, pushing the mystery woman off of him as he pushed himself against the rock wall behind him. "More clever than most," the woman replied, her voice gravelly and a growl erupting from her throat. Quinn watched in horror as Iris disappeared, and in her place, a hideous, monstrous crone stood in her place. Her skin was split apart and cracked. Her hair was missing and large. Sharp teeth pierced through her lower lip. Her eyes blazed red, and her mouth began to open wide, as if she were unhinging her lower jaw. A large howl escaped from her mouth, and Quinn found himself locked in terror. "Quinn!" a voice shouted, and he looked to his right to see Iris, his Iris, sitting along the rock wall a few feet away from him. The creature before him screamed, turning its attention on Iris and crawling quickly towards his girlfriend. Iris let out a scream as the creature got closer, a long, black forked tongue shooting out and running down Iris's face. The creature suddenly pulled back, a laugh piercing the cavern as it glared down at the young woman. "I can smell it. The child has begun growing inside you," the creature said, laughing all the while. Quinn looked on in shock as Iris met his gaze and tears streamed down her face. "I was planning on telling you at dinner. I was afraid you'd be scared off. We've only been dating a few months, and I thought the news would—" Iris began to say, tears hanging like crystals in the corners of her eyes. "Iris, it's okay. That's the best news you could have ever given me. I was gonna ask you to move in with me tonight. I guess your news trumps mine," Quinn joked, tears and laughs escaping them both as the horror of their situation began to sink in more and more. "The child will make you a much more delicious meal," the creature hissed, unhinging its jaw once more. Iris screamed as the creature moved to strike, never noticing Quinn leaping forward and pushing Iris out of the way. As he did so, the creature's teeth ripped out a chunk of Quinn's side, just as its razor-sharp claws ripped into his chest. "No!" Iris shouted, just as the creature released Quinn and sent him hurtling to the ground. Iris crawled over and held Quinn in her arms, turning him over so she could see his face. Tears streamed down her face as blood seeped out of his wounds. Why would you do that?" the creature asked, shock and awe taking hold as it stared down at its victim. Because I love her. I love her enough to die for her," Quinn said, his breath shortening as the blood loss began to set in. The sound of his voice and his words pierced the night air, and the creature suddenly began to howl in agony, flinging itself to the ground as pain engulfed it. The creature's body began to transform suddenly, just as a brilliant light of white and gold engulfed the cavern. Iris shielded her and Quinn's eyes just as a man stepped out of the light. He was a chiseled specimen, his body glowing and his eyes piercing as he took in the scene around them. Who are you?" Iris asked. "You modern mortals would not believe me, but I am Zeus," the man replied, leaning down as the creature before him began to transform. Its hideous appearance began to disappear, and in its place, a beautiful young woman appeared. Iris watched as the creature vanished, and Zeus wiped the blood from the woman's ruby lips. "What is happening?" Iris asked. You two mortals have freed my love from her curse, Zeus replied. My wife, Hera, cursed the woman lying here in my arms centuries ago. For my infidelity, she cursed this innocent woman to become the monster you see before you. I helped her the best I could, giving her her powers and a place to hide whenever humanity began to encroach on her home. I searched for centuries for a cure, secluding myself in the heart of Olympus until that time arrived. You two have found that cure for me, however. Cure? Iris asked. True love. I should have known, but my wife is clever. An act of true love saved my beloved Lamia from her curse. Quinn sacrificed himself for you, my dear, and that love pierced the curse entirely. For that, I shall heal your love. I apologize for the pain we've caused you, mortals. Lamia, rest now, my love. We ride for Olympus. Your pain is at an end. Iris watched as the man and woman disappeared in a brilliant glow of light. As they did, Quinn took a massive breath, and she watched as his wounds healed. Looking up into her eyes, he cupped her face in his hands and smiled. Iris, he said, tears streaming down his face. Quinn, she breathed, tears pouring out of her. I love you, he replied, resting his hand on her face and his free hand on her stomach. I love you too, with all my heart, she replied, leaning down to kiss him and resting her hand on her stomach as well. Glad to be alive and well once more. At that moment, love had truly won.